all of NFL history, every team has had that one quarterback. The champion.
Brady has his fifth. What a comeback.
The Hall of Famer.
Throwing in the end zone.
Or just the guy who put up video game-like numbers. With many teams, the choice is obvious. But for some teams, you could make a strong case for a few players. So, with that, here's our totally unscientific,
You like that? You like that?
but totally correct list of every NFL team's greatest quarterback ever.
Y'all think that's a good blitz?
And what better place to start than America's team? There are several great quarterbacks in play here, but the correct answer is Roger Staubach. He's a huge reason why the Cowboys became the most popular team in the NFL. He was the real-life version of Captain America, a clean-cut Navy vet who consistently found ways to win.
Imagine what he would have done if he hadn't have done the Navy.
In an 8-season span, he led the boys to 4 Super Bowl appearances. They went 2-2 in the big game, but their losses were epic battles against the Steel Curtain Steelers. Staubach could beat teams from within the pocket, but he was also such a good scrambler, he was named Roger the Dodger.
He was incredibly athletic. Roger the Dodger, able to escape pressure.
Got away from one. Got away twice.
And he was clutch.
When you've got a leader that wants to win that badly, it rubs off on everybody.
Also named Captain Comeback, he willed the Cowboys to victory time and time again.
He wanted it more than anybody I'd ever seen.
Staubach retired as the Cowboys' leading passer with 22,700 yards and 153 TDs.
Brought out the hero in all of us.
Got more out of the players he was playing with than anybody else, and that's another leadership quality.
Those numbers were later eclipsed, but Staubach is still king of the hill in Dallas.
Go you Dallas Cowboys, go.
But moving from Captain Comeback to the Comeback Kid, we have the greatest 49ers signal caller ever, Joe Montana. Montana had ice in his veins when the game was on the line, especially in the postseason.
Joe Montana was at his best when you needed him the most.
And Super Bowls are where Montana truly built his legacy, because no one was more flawless. A clean 4-0 record and a 127.8 passer rating.
There was nothing too big for him.
His drive to win Super Bowl 23 was one of the greatest ever.
Back to throw Montana. Stepped up, throws.
But let's not forget how good he was in the regular season.
Montana to throw. He's got Rathman. He's into the end zone. Touchdown 49ers.
When he left the Niners in 1993, he was a 2-time MVP and the franchise leader in passing yards and TDs. His place in the Hall of Fame was on lock, and his spot among the all-time greats was secure too.
He is number one. There is no question Joe Montana is number one.
But Montana wasn't the first QB to go 4-0 in Super Bowls, because a few years earlier, Terry Bradshaw did it for the Steelers. From 1974 to 1979, he won 4 titles and 2 Super Bowl MVPs. When Pittsburgh drafted Bradshaw first overall in 1970, the team was terrible, and the franchise was irrelevant.
Nothing greater happened to Terry Bradshaw than to go up to Pittsburgh and make Pittsburgh a winner.
And in the first few years of his career, Terry was pretty bad too.
He had all the problems that all rookies have, except he was under a gigantic microscope.
But once he figured it out, the Steelers built a dynasty around him.
We needed Terry at that time, and he stepped up and lit it up.
Eventually, Ben Roethlisberger replaced Bradshaw atop Pittsburgh's passing leaderboard. But it was the OG TB12 who helped turn the Steelers into one of the premier franchises in the league.
The guy's got more rings than a married pimp. And you know something? That's what matters at the end of the day.
And speaking of premier franchises, the Green Bay Packers seem to always have a great passer under center. And both Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre have a great case.
You know, some people wish, great players would just retire and stay retired.
But Rodgers matched Favre with a Super Bowl ring in Green Bay, and also earned 4 MVP awards to Favre's 3.
I feel like when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, he can make any throw on the field.
Rodgers' passing numbers were off the charts. 59,679 yards, 480 touchdowns, and a ridiculously good 1.4 interception rate, which is the NFL record.
When you see him throw the ball, it's effortless.
On the other hand, Favre did set the NFL record for interceptions in a career. Overall, Rodgers was just the better player and is the GOAT of the green and gold. And while Rodgers was always compared to Favre, Giants legend Eli Manning was always compared to his brother Peyton. Eli may have fallen short of his brother in most stat categories, but he matched him in the most important one, Super Bowl rings. And Eli's rings came against Tom Brady's Patriots, one being their 18-0 017. While other people often thought Eli was clueless,
seeing him, you would never think he threw for 400 yards and 6 touchdowns because he always had the same facial expressions.
He led the Giants' offense for 16 years and won a lot of games. And he was an Iron Man. He put together a streak of 210 consecutive starts, which was one of the longest runs in NFL history.
He's an assassin to me, can make throws from the left hash, right hash, down the field.
With that kind of durability, it's no wonder he left Big Blue as the franchise's passing leader, with 57,023 yards and 366 touchdowns.
Stats don't lie.
And Eli may have beat Tom Brady in the big game, but it's likely no QB will ever match Brady's career with the New England Patriots.
He is the winner of all winners, and that's what boils it down.
Even with those 2 L's to the Giants, he collected 6 rings and 4 Super Bowl MVPs in 9 trips to the Super Bowl as a Patriot.
He's the greatest quarterback ever to live on this earth.
And then you have to mention the 3 regular season MVPs and 14 Pro Bowls.
Those are the things that you can't measure statistically that really set him apart from the rest.
Plus the countless fourth-quarter comebacks and game-winning drives. Teams always left Brady too much time. And so it's no surprise he finished his time in New England with these absurd numbers: 74,571 yards and 541 TDs. And that's why he's the GOAT.
He's the best football player to ever play football.
But if there's anyone who could challenge him for his title, it's the guy currently playing in Kansas City. That would, of course, be Patrick Mahomes. From 2019 through 2023, he went to the Super Bowl 4 times, won 3 of them, and was named the game's MVP 3 times. And before Mahomes, the Chiefs had just 1 Super Bowl win. But in each of his first 6 seasons as the team starter, KC has made the AFC Championship game. In 2024, he already became the franchise's leader in passing yards at age 29, and his play style has completely revolutionized the quarterback position. Mahomes has put together an amazing run, and there's no sign of it ending. No one thought anyone would ever challenge Brady's records like Mahomes. But for Kurt Warner, no one ever thought he would even make it to the NFL. But he went from undrafted to running the greatest show on turf.
I waited a long time for this, and I'm just happy to finally get my chance.
With Warner throwing lasers to Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, and Marshall Faulk, the St. Louis Rams led the league in points in 1999, 2000, and 2001. Warner took home 2 MVP awards in that stretch. And thanks to all that firepower, the Rams made it to a pair of Super Bowls. In Super Bowl 34, Warner's bomb to Bruce in the 4th quarter gave the franchise its first title.
Kurt looked at Isaac. I basically told him, I'm coming to you.
Then, in Super Bowl 36, the Rams were a minute away from a second Lombardi trophy, only to have Tom Brady lead a game-winning drive to set in motion the Pats dynasty.
The one game in my career that I've thought about more than any others was losing that Super Bowl.
But at least Warner won a ring, because Dolphins all-time great Dan Marino never did. Marino went to just 1 Super Bowl in 1985 and lost to Joe Montana and the 49ers.
If there's anyone that ever deserved the Super Bowl win, it was him. He'll go down as one of the greatest of all time.
But don't judge him on that, because he's easily the greatest QB never to win a title. At the time of his retirement, he held the NFL record for touchdown passes, passing yards, completions, touchdown passes in a season, and passing yards in a season. He also led 33 fourth-quarter comebacks, second only to Johnny Unitas's 34. Marino was the greatest passer the NFL had ever seen at the time, and he paved the way for so many gunslingers that came after him.
And if they say different, they're lying.
Like Matt Ryan, a.k.a. Matty Ice, a.k.a. the guy who set every major passing record in Falcons history. For 14 seasons, he operated Atlanta's high-flying offense. In 2016, he hit his peak. He was voted NFL MVP and reached the Super Bowl against the Patriots. And yes, that was the 28-3 game. But you can't blame Ryan for that. If Kyle Shanahan calls a few running plays in the 4th quarter, Ryan gets a ring, Tom Brady takes an L, and the Falcons don't get clowned for completing the biggest choke job in Super Bowl history. Matt Ryan was one of the game's elite pocket passers for many years. But the greatest dual-threat QB we've ever seen, well, That goes to Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. In 2018, the Ravens defied everyone when they took him with the last pick in the first round.
With the 32nd pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, the Baltimore Ravens select Lamar Jackson.
Then, in 2019, he set the league on fire. Jackson led the NFL with 36 touchdown passes, and he also set the record for quarterbacks with 1,206 rushing yards. That performance earned him the MVP award, one of the two that he's won in his first 6 seasons. And with 8 seasons behind center, Baltimore made the playoffs 5 times in those 6 years. Not bad for a running back. Unfortunately for the Ravens, Jackson hasn't turned those playoff runs into a Super Bowl trip yet, which is something Jim Kelly of the Buffalo Bills was an expert at. He just couldn't win the big game. For 4 seasons in a row, 1990 through 1993, Kelly and the Bills played in the Super Bowl. They went 0-4, and the last 3 were all blowouts.
Coming up short or failure doesn't discourage you guys. It pisses you off.
But 3 decades later, Buffalo is still trying to get back there. And Kelly became the franchise's career leader in passing touchdowns and yards, and he did it in just 11 seasons. The same number of seasons Donovan McNabb played for the Eagles. At first, he didn't have it easy in Philly, but really, who does? On the night of the 1999 NFL Draft, Birds fans booed because the Eagles chose him over Ricky Williams with the 2nd pick.
The fans are irate over the fact that they didn't take Ricky Williams, but I hope the fans don't take it out on Donovan McNabb.
And then, McNabb struggled as a rookie, but in 2000, everything changed. Over the next decade, 5 led the Eagles to 8 playoff berths and 1 memorable Super Bowl. The Eagles lost a heartbreaker to the Patriots, and the game became McNabb's version of the Michael Jordan flu game. And eventually, he became the franchise leader in passing yards and TDs. That was enough for him to be immortalized in Philly, and the Birds retired his number.
Number 5 will always love you.
Not bad for a kid from Chicago. And then, when he was growing up there, McNabb might have heard some stories about the greatest quarterback in Bears history. Sid Luckman is still talked about with respect in the Windy City. He's right there with Red Grange and Bronco Nagurski among the franchise's early legends. Luckman simply did it all for the Monsters of the Midway. As a quarterback, he led Chicago to 4 NFL championships in the 1940s. That includes the Bears' 73-0 destruction of Washington in the 1940 title game. And he was a two-way star when starters had to play both on offense and defense. As a defensive back, he snagged 17 interceptions in his career. Plus, he was also the Bears' punter. And the most amazing thing about Luckman is that he held the franchise's passing touchdown record for 72 years, until Jay Cutler finally broke it in 2015. In short, he was the Chi-Town version of Superman. Not to be confused with the Superman of the 21st century, Cam Newton. When he hit the field for the first time in 2011, he made Panthers fans completely forget about the days of Jake Delhomme and Kerry Collins, putting together one of the greatest rookie seasons we've ever seen. Newton was an absolute beast. He was as big as a tight end and had a rocket for an arm. But on top of that, he was a great runner who loved running people over, and his QB sneak on the goal line was just unstoppable. In fact, he ended his Panthers career as the franchise's all-time leader in rushing touchdowns, scoring almost twice as many TDs on the ground as Christian McCaffrey. Cam gave the Panthers their best years in franchise history, culminating in a 15-1 season in 2015, where he won MVP and led Carolina to the Super Bowl. Despite the heartbreaking loss, Newton turned the Panthers into a consistent contender and set the franchise records for passing TDs and yards in the process. Moving from one legendary dual threat to another, Broncos great John Elway was really ahead of his time. He was fast enough to outrun defenders, and he'd put his body on the line to gain extra yards. But his arm was so good, people often forget about his rushing ability because he could throw it as hard and as far as anyone. He ended his career with over 51,000 passing yards. Yet, for all his talent, Elway was considered a loser for a large chunk of his career because in the late 80s, his Broncos went 0-3 in Super Bowls. In fact, it wasn't until the 97-98 season, when he was 37 years old, that he won his first title. Then went back-to-back the following year to finish his career, and he changed that narrative forever. The Cincinnati Bengals have yet to have a quarterback get them that elusive first championship, but Ken Anderson gave it a good run. For more than a decade, he was the Bengals' starting quarterback. earning 4 Pro Bowl nods. And in 1981, he was named league MVP. The Bengals went to the Super Bowl that season, but ultimately lost to Joe Montana and the 49ers. In 1982, he set an NFL record for completion percentage in a season. And when he eventually passed the baton to Boomer Esiason in 1986, Anderson has set the bar for passing yards and touchdowns in Cincinnati. The Bengals have actually had a lot of great QB play over the years, but the same can't be said of their fellow Ohio ball club, the Cleveland Browns, who seem to be stuck in quarterback hell. In fact, the Browns' greatest quarterback ever was their very first one, Otto Graham. During his 10-year career, Graham led his league in passing yards 5 times and led in yards per attempt at 4. But most importantly, his teams finished first every season. He made it to 10 championship games, when only the division or conference champion got to play in the postseason. And he won 7 of those title games, with 3 coming after the Browns joined the NFL from the AAFC. It'll be almost impossible for anyone to match that record. Matthew Stafford, on the other hand, has never won a division title in his 12 years with the Lions, and Detroit made the playoffs just 3 times in that span. But Stafford was the definition of a good player on a bad team.
Hey, let's get this! Let's get this one now, let's go!
In 2021, when he was traded to the Rams for Jared Goff, he held the franchise records for completions, yards, and touchdowns.
He can make every throw and then some.
He was the most talented passer ever to wear Honolulu blue.
He's fearless. He's willing to fire the ball into tight windows and make some stuff happen.
He just wasn't the most successful one. And speaking of unsuccessful quarterbacks, we've now arrived at the New York Jets, whose all-time greatest signal caller is still Broadway Joe Namath. Namath has been a franchise icon ever since signing a record-setting $407,000 contract as a rookie in 1965. He's best known for guaranteeing a Super Bowl win.
I think we got a heck of a shot of winning. We beat anybody in the world, and I think we're going to win next Sunday.
And then leading the biggest upset in pro football history.
Got to have confidence in your team. Got to have confidence in yourself.
Being the first quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards in a season, playing through brutal injuries, especially to his knees, and enjoying that New York nightlife to the fullest. Those things make it easy to forget that he threw so many brutal interceptions, and that the Jets had just 3 winning seasons in his 12 years with them. But he's still loved more than any other quarterback the franchise has produced.
Remember, number 12, in spirit and in heart, I'll always be with the Jets.
And it's hard to love any quarterback the Texans have produced. So Matt Schaub gets the nod here over Deshaun Watson because A, Watson only played 4 seasons in Houston, and B, Schaub made the Texans offense good for the first time in their history, after 5 years of struggles with David Carr. In 2009, Schaub led the NFL in pass attempts, completions, and yards. In 2011, he led the Texans to their first ever playoff appearance and their first ever playoff win. In 2012, Houston went back to the playoffs and won another game. In 2013, his run in Houston ended badly, with a 2-14 season. But he's still the franchise leader in passing yards and touchdowns, though it wouldn't be surprising to see C.J. Stroud take this spot in the near future. And while Texans have yet to have an all-time great quarterback, the same can't be said for the Indianapolis Colts, who have employed both Johnny Unitas and Peyton Manning. But we all know who the greatest Colt ever was, because Manning's production was just absurd. In 13 years with the club, the Sheriff threw 399 touchdown passes, averaging just under 2 per game. In 2004, he set an NFL record at the time for TD throws in a season. Then in the 2006 season, he won Indy their first Super Bowl since 1971.
The Colts are world champions! World champions for the first time!
He led 45 game-winning drives with the Colts. And when it was all said and done, he had won 4 MVPs with the franchise. But early in Manning's career, one of his biggest rivals was the Jaguars' Mark Brunell. The lefty was part of the team's core from the very beginning. In 1995, he came over from Green Bay for the Jags' inaugural season, and he became the starter in Week 3. 9 seasons later, Brunell had delivered a franchise-record 144 touchdown passes. And from 1996 to 1999, he led Jacksonville to 4 straight playoff berths and a pair of AFC title games. He set the standard for Trevor Lawrence and every other Jags QB that followed him. The only thing he lacked was a cool nickname, like the Snake, which belonged to Raiders legend Ken Stabler. He earned the moniker in high school for his running ability. He would wind his way through defenses like a snake.
He could just step it up a notch when you needed it.
And he was an amazing scrambler early in his pro career.
Kenny Stabler was the definition of clutch.
But Oakland really needed him to throw the ball down the field, and he was one of the best to ever do that in silver and black. Before Derek Carr came along, Stabler was the Raiders' all-time leader in passing yards and touchdown passes. And unlike Carr, he won a lot. In 1974, he won the league MVP award. Then, in the 1976 season, Stabler brought the franchise its first Super Bowl title.
They call him Mr. Clutch.
He finished with a 69-26-1 record as the Raiders' starting QB. At the same time Stabler's silver and black were lighting up scoreboards in Oakland, Jim Hart's Big Red was putting up big-time yards and points in St. Louis. In the 70s, Hart piloted what became known as Air Coryell, the innovative passing attack devised by then Cardinals coach Don Coryell. Throwing to stars like Mel Gray, Terry Metcalf, and Jackie Smith, Hart made the Cards an offensive juggernaut.
His philosophy was for a defense to have to defend the entire field.
Every year from 1973 through 1977, they ranked in the top 12 in both total offense and scoring offense.
And Don would always be yelling, throw it, throw it. I mean, it'd be 3rd down and inches or 4th down and inches. And
Hart went on to play 18 years for the Cards, which allowed him to claim all the franchise's all-time passing records. But Coryell's offense wasn't known as Air Coryell until Coryell left the Cardinals and began coaching the Chargers. The scheme turned Dan Fouts into a Hall of Famer and franchise legend. But a couple of decades later, Philip Rivers came along and bumped Fouts off the pedestal. Rivers' run began in 2006, when he threw for 22 touchdowns. When it ended in 2019, Rivers had shattered Fouts' marks, ending up with 397 touchdown passes and 59,271 yards. But the craziest part about Rivers' run in San Diego was that after taking over as the starter, he never missed a game, starting 224 straight for the club. Moving from a quarterback who never missed a start to one who actually helped start a franchise, Fran Tarkenton was the first quarterback in Minnesota Vikings history. In 1961, he started for them as a rookie. And all these years later, he's still the best quarterback in Vikes history. Tarkenton was one of the NFL's first great dual-threat QBs. And though he's often remembered for his wild scrambling, he could sling it too. Tarkenton retired as the franchise's leading passer. 4.5 decades later, he still holds that distinction. And the Vikings were winners under him. In the 1970s, he led the team to 2 Super Bowls. Unfortunately, they lost both games.
I guess it was just the ultimate disappointments. I cannot tell you the feeling of emptiness it gives you, of hopelessness it gives you.
But to this day, no one else has gotten him back there. Like Tarkenton, New Orleans Saints legend Drew Brees was on the shorter side, listed at 6 feet. But instead of running around so he could see downfield, Brees stood in the pocket and picked defenses apart. He's one of the most accurate passers ever, completing 68.8% of his passes with the Saints. In 2006, New Orleans gambled that Brees could come back from a devastating shoulder injury that ended his time with the Chargers.
I'm going to say New Orleans helped save me at that point in my career. And
the move paid off big. With Brees running the offense, the Saints became a powerhouse.
Something special, and it was destiny.
In 2009, he brought a Super Bowl title to the Big Easy for the first time. He's football royalty in New Orleans and leads the Saints in all passing categories by a landslide. Sticking with the trend of shorter quarterbacks, Russell Wilson shocked the football world when he won the Seahawks job as a rookie, and then instantly became one of the NFL's best quarterbacks. He wowed Seattle's fans with long ball accuracy and scrambling ability. With 3 running the show, the Hawks were perennial winners.
At the beginning of the year, I asked the boys, why not us? We're here for a reason. We're here for a reason, and let's go prove it tonight.
In just his second season, he destroyed the Broncos to win Super Bowl 48. In 2014, Seattle went back to the big game, where they didn't give the ball to Marshawn and rushed through a game-losing pick on the goal line. Wilson was stuck chasing redemption after that, and despite not getting another title, Seattle made the playoffs in 8 of his 10 seasons. And Russ set every franchise passing record along the way. But now we're back to the man who Russ lost that second Super Bowl to, the man who ruined many QB's Super Bowl dreams, Tom Brady. Because in his short time with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he quickly became their greatest quarterback ever. In just 3 seasons with the Bucs, he's second on the franchise's career TD pass list and third on its passing yards list. Oh, and he won his 7th Super Bowl ring and 5th Super Bowl MVP. Simply put, he had one of the greatest late career runs in sports history, and he doubled Tampa Bay's total ring count. And while Brady won Super Bowls from his early 20s to his mid-40s, Titans or Oilers legend Warren Moon didn't even get his first shot in the NFL until he was 28. Moon actually started in the Canadian Football League, where he set the league on fire, winning 5 consecutive Grey Cups from 1978 to 1982. Then, in 1984, Moon was finally given his chance in the NFL.
When you feel strong, you think strong. And you could stand in the pocket stronger.
While it started a bit slow for him in Houston, he ended up making the Pro Bowl in his final 6 seasons with the team. He spent 10 seasons in total with the Oilers, shattering the franchise's passing yards and passing touchdown records, which he still holds to this day. And the final quarterback on this list took his own detour in Canada before becoming an NFL starter. That would be Washington great Joe Theismann. He didn't get the starting job in D.C. until he was 29, and then he struggled. But finally, in 1979, it all came together for him. And in 1981, his career took off when Joe Gibbs became the head coach. In 1983, Theismann was named MVP and led the Skins to their first Super Bowl title. But sadly, 2 years after that achievement, his career ended in one gruesome moment. As the Giants' Lawrence Taylor was sacking Theismann, his leg snapped. But still, in just 8 seasons as the full-time starter, Theismann became the franchise's leader in passing yards and completions. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, stick with Blitz, subscribe, and check out this next one.